What precautionary measure did you take, thinking just to be safe, that unexpectedly ended up saving the day later on? Nurse here. Per usual, I was being overworked. I had over 9 patients in the ER. One patient had cancer and hadn't been feeling well. The doctor insisted he was fine. However, just to be safe, I continued to regularly check in on him as he was chilling in a chair in the hallway. He started complaining of feeling super tired and off. His daughter, who also was a doctor, kind of said something along the lines of, "You've had a stressful day, Dad. We will get you home once the doctor discharges you." Just to cover my ass, I took his vitals. His blood pressure was 70s/40s. I had a critical care room open and immediately rolled him in there. Calling out to the doctor that something was wrong, I could just feel it. The charge nurse got mad when I told her he needed that room. She didn't like that I was a travel nurse calling the shots, but I didn't care. Doctor felt I was overreacting, but they repeated vitals and did a stat scan. The guy was bleeding internally. I can't remember full details now, and they found mets to his spinal cord. We were able to stabilize and ship him to a bigger hospital. That irritated ER doctor thanked me later and said if that guy went home, he most likely would have died that night. It felt really, really good. All because I listened to my patient and my gut and didn't let the stress of over 9 patients cloud my judgment. As a manager, I noticed my team was getting saddled with harder work than the other teams. I informed my boss, but she laughed at me and sent me packing. Since we tracked employee productivity by case worked, I had a feeling I'd need some kind of proof in the future, so I went back to my team, explained the situation, and informed them I wanted them to keep daily logs of all of their cases and timestamp them, even though the system did this automatically. Fast forward 2 years. Another manager believes his employees are getting harder cases than the other teams, so he complains about it to my/his boss. His rapport with her is significant, as he works the same shift, so she looks into it. After a 3-day secret investigation, I get one of the most aggressive and hateful emails of my career, accusing me of cherry-picking millions of cases over years of work for my team. My response was to hand her daily logs from every employee for 2 years. 11,000 sheets of paper, give or take. The absolutely incredulous look she gave me was worth it alone. "What's this?" "That's 100% accurate daily logs of every employee and their cases worked." "Why do you have this?" "To protect them from you, when you inevitably did this." Less than insert offended look here greater than this is ridiculous. There's no need for them to be wasting time keeping these logs. There wasn't until today. Feel free to check them. "Oh, I will." 3 days later, I got my apology. Turns out an employee was coming in early and scanning in my employee's paperwork and tossing their cover sheets, so there was no record they had done any of the difficult work. After running numbers, it was determined that the other manager was incorrect, and the evidence showed my team worked roughly 34% of difficult cases and accounted for 15% of the total workforce. The day shift employees all got into trouble for passing off hard cases. The day I got to tell my team their logs literally saved all of our jobs was one of my best days at work ever. I joined a company as a summer intern, and when I was trained, they told me that after dispatching, you would use a colored highlighter to mark you dispatched the order already and put the sheet in the correct cubbyhole. "Make sure you use only your color so we know who dispatched," they said during training. My spidey senses went off on that one. What if someone uses my highlighter color and messes up? I don't want to get blamed for their mistake. So I started initialing with my colored highlighter. Figured it takes the same amount of time, and I am still complying with their process, but there's an extra layer of confidence. A few weeks later, they came to me asking why I messed up a dispatch. I told them I didn't dispatch that one, and they said, "Well, it's the same color of highlighter you use," showing me the sheet of paper with a line drawn on the corner. "Right, but I always initial my dispatches," I replied, showing them all my past paperwork with initials in my own color highlighter. They were confused for a second before thanking me and walking away. Later that day, they let go one of our coworkers. Turns out he fucked up and figured he could cover his mistake by throwing me under the bus. He just didn't count on me, anticipating the obvious outcome of such a system. That was just the beginning of my COA career, nearly 20 years ago now. After that incident, everyone on the team started initialing their pages too. Used to have a ground floor apartment and a motion sensor camera on my patio connected to my phone. My friends and I got home till 4 a.m. from being out all night and were chill in the living room. Motion detected on the back patio. I dismiss it since it's normally a stray cat or leaves blowing. A few minutes later, I decided to check out the motion recording just to see. It was a man that hopped my patio and was peeking at us through the slits in the blinds. I went to live view to see if he was still there, and he was. I start going ballistic, screaming and about to fight this guy. I'm storming to my patio door, but he fled by then. Glad I checked the camera. I was scheduled for a mammography when I got 50. Somehow, it didn't work out that year, because the appointment was in Bavaria, but I live in Düsseldorf. And I also thought it was not that important. But a year later, they sent me the invitation again. I scheduled a mammography in Bavaria then, as I was visiting my parents anyway, and I thought, well, they probably aren't going to find anything. But if I have cancer and didn't have that mammography, I'm going to regret it. I expected a letter telling me that they had found nothing. But in fact, they did find something that needed further investigation. Turned out to be slow-growing breast cancer. 1 year earlier, it would not have been there yet. And 1 year later, it would have been much larger and possibly needed chemo as well as the surgery. But as it was, they could just cut it out, and that was that. My job has a company-wide well-being program, and each site has a representative. They offer challenges throughout the year, and staff are encouraged to compete with the other sites. We were losing a step challenge, so I jokingly said to my building wellness representative that they needed to send out an email encouraging everyone to log their steps because I hate losing. They said, actually, would you be interested in taking over this role? I don't have time for it. I awkwardly said sure because I'm a people pleaser. I found out that week that there were a ton of benefits that they hadn't signed us up for, one of which was a mobile mammogram. So I signed us up for that ASAP. The bus came and went. A week later, a person I had never seen came up and asked if I was like Lazarus, and I said yes. Turns out she was working in our building that day, and saved the mobile mammogram bus and decided to hop on and get checked. She discovered she had stage 3 breast cancer with 0 symptoms. If that chain of events hadn't happened, me commenting about losing the step challenge by choosing to schedule a mammogram bus, her being on site that day, this woman, a wife and grandmother, would likely have died of breast cancer. Because of this chain of events, she had a double mastectomy and will live to see her grandchildren grow up. This is a super mundane example, but very useful to remember. Every time I'm in an airport, I take photos of my bags before checking them in. So this one time they lose my bag, and I'm sitting at the help desk, and they say something like, "Can you describe it? Does it have any identifying features?" I was able to just bust out the photos. They found my bag very quickly. Shared this story with people at a conference, and now every year they all tell me they take photos of their bags, and every now and then it saves someone's ass. On a similar note, also taking photos of room numbers and building locations. Was coming home from sledding when I was a wee 6 years old. Just me and my dad in the old Ford Explorer. Before we left the park, we had an argument about wearing my seatbelt. I think it was because I was bundled up and chunky, and did not want the added sensory discomfort of being strapped into the passenger seat. Dad wins, I wear the seatbelt. He forgets to put his on. About a mile from our humble farmhouse, he's going decently slow because the roads are slick. We get ice and spun out anyways. We run right into the tree line through a barbed wire fence and smack into a tree head-on pretty hard. Because my dad was not wearing his seatbelt, he ended up on my side of the car, head smashed into the windshield, blood everywhere. Luckily, an older couple were driving down our relatively quiet country road and stopped to help. They drove my poor little traumatized self down the road to our house and took Dad to the ER. He was thankfully fine, just needed stitches, maybe a mild concussion. I think my dad still had glass coming out from his scalp like 5 years after that, though. Glad he was a persistent, good father and made me put my seatbelt on. My paranoia about a strange guy in a car kept my house from flooding. We had a house fire October 2021, and we were bouncing back and forth between our house and a rental. Christmas Eve was extra cold and our pipes were frozen in our house, 1894, no insulation yet. So we decided to go to the rental for Christmas Eve. My wife and daughter were taking one car, and I was taking the other. When I left the house, I saw a man sitting in his car across the street messing on his phone. Given the cold weather, it seemed odd. When my wife left, the man pulled his car across the street to the spot she just left. This is a one-way street. Since I'm further back, I watch for a bit. But he doesn't do anything, just gets back on his phone. Eventually, my wife calls and asks where I am, because she didn't bring her keys for the rental. I drove over and let her in and tell her about the guy. She encourages me to go back and point one of our security cameras his direction just in case. When I get back, he's still there, so I go inside. Once I'm inside, I hear water running. In the 30 minutes I was gone, the water started running again. In the back kitchen where the fire had been, the faucet was still on and was flooding the room. I shut that off and went downstairs to check the cellar under the kitchen for water leakage. In the cellar was a cracked copper pipe spraying water across the room. So I shut off the water and cleaned up the kitchen before the damage could cause permanent problems. When I left, the guy's car was still there, but he was gone. I think he was meeting a neighbor for Christmas Eve dinner. But if he hadn't been there, the house would have been flooding for who knows how long. My son was extremely colicky. He would only sleep on me, so we spent the first 6 months of his life sleeping on the chaise part of the couch. This one evening, we were laying on the area rug. It was super soft and plush, and he fell asleep. I was stoked. I could sleep again in my bed. However, I just didn't feel right leaving him there. I carefully moved into his bed, and it took a while, but he eventually got back to sleep. The next morning, I was awakened by my dog barking at me. One thing to note, this dog never barked in the house. If he wanted to wake me up, he'd jump into my bed and do it that way. When I got up to let him out, the carpet was soaked. I was pissed because I thought the dog peed. He was housebroken in my bedroom. Turns out we had a pipe burst and the entire house had a minimum of 2 of water throughout. I shuddered to think about what could have happened if I had left my son on the area rug. It's something I had never done before and wouldn't think was the acceptable thing to do, but I was so sleep deprived. I'm a nurse. I was relatively new at the time of this. I had a patient, 50s, female, who was in for an NSTMI, heart attack, but not the type of heart attack everybody pictures. She's been straight chillin' all day. She's waiting for an inpatient bed. We've gotten her aspirin. She's got a parent drip going. We've got Pure Nitro for chest pain. Patient calls me in to let me know that her chest pain has returned, 5/10 pain, and she would like some nitro. I say sure, no problem. I go get her nitro. Give it to her. Patient seems fine. No obvious distress, no change in her vital signs. Talking and joking with me and her husband. Something in me was pushing me to grab a new EKG even though she'd had one not that long ago and she was on the telemetry monitor. I go grab the EKG machine just to be extra thorough. Big fat STEMI. Big ol' heart attack. Rushed her to the cath lab and she ended up getting several stents placed, but she pulled through. It was the first time as a nurse I felt personally responsible for saving a life. Obs, the cath lab team did more than I did, lol. And it's because I just wanted to be extra precautionary. Now I always get an EKG with any kind of change in chest pain. Slept with bedroom door open the other day. We almost never do that, and honestly it was because I wanted to be able to hear for some reason. Smelled gas at midnight. Turns out my daughter had turned the stove knob just a touch before going to bed 5 hours earlier. That was a scary one. Idiotity. Responding to a few questions I've seen, no idea if folks will ever see them. The stove is a brand new 2023 Frigidaire with front knobs, eyed just above the oven door as opposed to set back along the backsplash. Why gas? I am pretty big into cooking and really value the control you get from gas. I use lots of cast iron and have actually cracked the top of an electric range, which was cheaper to buy a new one than repair, thanks GE. I do wish I had gone induction, but my other half wasn't into it, and she's the boss, huh? On the specific knob action, yes, you'd have to push and turn to get the gas flowing. My daughter is too, so when she reaches up to grab the knob I think she does so with inherent 4-out force, making the action much easier for her. Side note, she's just about figured out the latch on the stair baby gates just from watching us do it, and that has a latch you pull and lift up. So I wouldn't be surprised if she was mimicking what she sees me do 5 times a day. Someone asked about thermocoupler. That auto closes the gas valve with no heat. I guess this stove doesn't have that. There is a faint hiss, but it's a 2-story house, and when I'm downstairs I almost always have music on, so I didn't hear it. Lastly, thanks all for directing me to gas alarms beyond carbon monoxide alarms. I did Google in the middle of the night that night, and found somewhere that natural gas, which this was, has a narrow window of flammability, and that a complete explosion would be somewhat unlikely, who knows for sure. But I am glad I did not have to test that hypothesis. My son had graduated college, and then decided to follow his girlfriend to a small town where she got her dream job. It was a small town and good jobs were hard to come by, so almost a year went by with him only working part-time jobs. He had hit the age where we could not have him on our medical insurance anymore. I was concerned about this and started looking into options and told him to apply to our state's low-income medical. For once he listened, and I thank God every day, because not a month after being approved, he started to have leg pain. The first 2 trips to the doctor, they wrote it off as a pulled muscle, but the third time they ordered tests to find out he had a blood clot that stretched from his lower calf up into his abdomen. Placed him right into the hospital, but remember, small town, did not have the expertise to take care of this 50-mile ambulance ride to bigger hospital, lots of tests to find out why, and a total of over $120,000 of charges, when all was said and done, in which he had to pay less than $20. He is good now, but it did damage the vein in his leg, and he had pain from it, and will have to be on blood thinners the rest of his life. Not me to my parents. I was probably an early teen and my parents were leaving to go run an errand, but it was kind of early, about 8 or 9 a.m., so I didn't want to go and asked to stay home. My dad agreed and came to ask me again, and I said I wanted to stay. They ended up leaving but turned back around, and my dad said they didn't want me staying home, and I better just get up and go. After some whining, I agreed to go. I think we were gone maybe 20 minutes when they got a call from the police that our alarm system went off and our house had been burglarized by 2 guys. The police was able to get one of them, but the other one got away. Who knows in what situation I would have been in had I stayed home. It was around 1:30 a.m. a couple months back. I was laying in bed, struggling to sleep. My husband had already passed out next to me an hour or so earlier. I put my phone on the charging dock on my bedside table, ringer off, so it wouldn't distract me anymore, but I couldn't bring myself to look away from it. I got a weird feeling in my gut, like there was something I was supposed to do, but I didn't know what. I'm laying there looking at my phone's lock screen when it lights up. My sister is calling. Only thing is, it's 1:30 a.m. My sister is a nursing student and goes to bed at like 9 p.m. I grab it and answer. It's not my sister. A girl's voice I don't recognize asked me, "Hey, is this ______ sister?" I respond yes, and she goes on to tell me my sister's been roofied at the bar they're at together. She can't drive. My sister refused an ambulance and she's now showing EOD symptoms. I shake my husband awake. I'm 5'2", 110 pounds. I cannot lift another adult human. And we're in the car speeding another town over so I can get my sister. The whole time I am thinking, what would have happened if I had gone to sleep? I'd never been so thankful for insomnia. Sister is fine. She had severely low blood pressure, body spasms, paralysis, vomiting, the works. Stayed with her for the weekend to make sure she was okay. Physically, yes. Mentally, no. I was never one to want the aisle seat at the movies, but for some reason, I wanted that night. My friends and I were in college, and on a snowy night, we went to the movies. For whatever reason that night, I decided I wanted the aisle seat. Halfway through the movie, I see a light behind the screen that made the side of the screen not show up well. A few seconds later, there were flames. No one noticed. I couldn't believe it. I whispered to my roommates that we needed to go, and there was a fire. 5 or 6 of us got up and left. No alarms were going off. The screen was clearly on fire, and still no one noticed. We got up to the top of the stairs, and everyone was watching the movie. Right as we were exiting, I yelled into the theater, "The screen's on fire. You need to leave." We had to go downstairs to the lobby. We were ahead of everyone else because everyone else had to gather their hats, mittens, and coats. The lobby was empty of customers, and all the concession stand workers were sweeping and making popcorn. Still, no alarms were going off. I yelled down to the people at the concession stand, "There's a fire in the theater 6. They don't react." I yelled down as we were rapidly going down the stairs. They had no idea what I was talking about. I finally had to go right up to the concession stand and say, "There is a fire in the theater." They yelled back to me, "There's a fire in the theater." Yes, that's what I've been trying to tell you. I don't know if I would have noticed the fire and gotten out as safely if I hadn't been sitting on the aisle seat that night. Get an old box or a backpack and fill it with an extra set of old clothes, including shoes/socks/shirt/pants, a simple first aid kit, a flashlight, some water, and a roll of toilet paper. Put it in the trunk of your car. I guarantee that you will use it one day. If you want it even smarter, add one of those shiny emergency blankets, a whistle, duct tape, and multi-tool. It doesn't take up much space. I just recently used the pants, the socks, multi-tool, and water at a tailgate party. The toilet paper was used several times through the years. I'm a hero for that one. You never know. Edit. Lots of great additions to this post in comments below. I keep both a waterproof backpack and a small box of stuff, including many of the other things mentioned. It's not from paranoia. I'm just an old Boy Scout who hates getting caught with no clean pants to wear. Be prepared, and at least have some basics. Safe travels, everyone. I work in ed. About 25 years ago, I had a crash and lost a day's work because I did not save and did not have backups. I started to back up everything: emails, work items, code, databases, etc., not just local backups, but remote and eventually off-site backups. Good standard operating procedures now, but back then it was extra, and because hard drive space was expensive, it was not done as it should have been. My paranoia has saved my ass many times. 1. Customer said he was going to sue us for breach of contract. Boss was panicking, had nothing on his side to prove one way or another. He had a policy of deleting emails more than 6 months old. I remember the request they bad made, dug out a 3-year-old email from them and my reply, forwarded to him. He sent it to the client and never heard another word about it. 2. Boss bought a tape backup for servers. They ran every night, and tapes were swapped daily. The tapes were never tested. When we needed them, they failed. Luckily, I had much of the data already backed up on other drives and was able to restore it because I never trusted those tapes. 3. Had backups of databases and code for our colo site taken before a move from one set of cabinets to another on a Saturday night. All the servers came back up except one SQL server. I was able to restore it after many hours, but we lost nothing but time. 4. Backed up source code for the company's only application onto multiple backup source control servers. The primary server died. I was able to have developers working again in 5 minutes while I fixed the primary. 5. Backups of databases on customer sites have saved me several times, especially when someone needed a change right now, and there's no time for backups. There is always time for backups. 6. Customer needed a data migration from an ancient 386 that had not been powered off for at least 15 years. Vital information found nowhere else. On an operating system no one has ever used the OS. I was able to back up and begin to migrate their data, and when that 386 died a month later, we were already deploying our application on new servers. 7. At another company, I joined and found no backups at all were being done. I built out a new backup system and started doing nightly backups of databases and file servers onto non-shared storage. Despite warnings, I was told I could not lock down Workstation because the users needed local admin rights. One user clicked on an email with ransomware. Every shared drive was infected and encrypted. No one could do any work and people were panicking. I told the owners to send everyone home. 12 hours later, I restored back to the last backup all of the files and databases. 8. A few months later at the same job, I was asked to install an application on the owner's computer because I had admin rights. She demanded to have local admin rights because this is my company. Fine. Guess who clicked on a ransomware link 3 weeks later? No clues, just guess. Again, I had to restore from backups. 9. At a new company, I have critical data backed up across at least 9 different locations, on-site and off-site, and it has saved us many, many times from accidental deletions of entire directory structures, bad code deployments, to digging into 5-year-old logs because someone needed some data. Even at home, multiple backups of family pictures and files have been worth it. I was able to save 20-year-old pics and video of my wedding, college thesis papers, and more. Backups are so important because it is your personal history. Losing data now is like losing all of your childhood photos and films. All you have left is your memories, and human memories are flawed.